everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening or perhaps watching another episode of Retail Redeveloped. I'm really excited today to be joined by another total retail nerd. I have a feeling that we're going to get into the weeds a little bit when it comes to all things retail and especially fashion. I'm joined by Ron Thurston. He's the vice president of stores at INTERMIX. And I just found out that his new official book called Retail Pride came out yesterday. So we're going to have a little celebration of his new accomplishment today as well. But before I just rattle on, Ron, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me. And do me a favor, give people a little color on who you are, what you do. You're a longtime retail vet. You've worked with some massive names in the industry. Walk people through kind of who they are, why they should be excited to listen to what you have to say, and then we'll get into it a little bit more.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. So my name is Ron Thurston. I'm the vice president of stores at INTERMIX. For those of you that may not know INTERMIX, it was founded actually 27 years ago this month by two brothers. It's the largest multi-brand specialty retailer in the country, and it's owned by Gap Inc. They bought it about 6 years ago. So it's a really interesting space. It's the kind of mix of highest end kind of designer, our own private label brands, all the best contemporary, all kind of, we really do call it mixed together in the store. And we don't merchandise it by brand. It's a really unique shopping experience. And so we sit in a really important place within the Gap Inc. organization at the same time, because we are often like the first one at trend. We're the ones that are there for Fashion Week. We kind of choose what's hot for the new season, what brands are important. And then kind of that best-selling information translates to Gap, Banana Republic, as they start to set their trends for the season. So that's what I do today. In the past, I've run retail for some brands like Saint Laurent. For the Americas, I helped launch Bonobos and their kind of retail business model, which is a fascinating story. And I grew up actually at the Gap. So it's nice to come back full circle here and run their smallest yet, I think very important part of the family of brands. And my love of the industry started really young, and I think grew up with this idea that retail is such a self-taught, self-led, fun business, and that you're surrounded by people every day who also love the business. And that just multiplies and grows. And from there, it's choosing the right brands to work for and the right leaders. And I kind of have reached this point now where I felt like putting all that into writing for everyone that works in stores, the millions of people who work in stores, has never been done. And I thought it was time. It was time before the pandemic, but it's really time now to celebrate them.
And I want to unpack that, because right now, so many retailers are being affected. So many workers are being affected, both from the retail standpoint, from the hospitality standpoint, restaurant standpoint. I really want to dive into that. But before we do, walk me through kind of where were you when you decided to make retail less of like I'm going to do this until I get a real job, to making it a passion, making it a career, making it a path that would eventually lead you to write a book about your experiences. Walk me through. Was there a moment in time that you said, like, this is what I'm going to do. This is who I am.
Yeah, it really was. I actually studied fashion design and retail merchandising at FITM in California. And because I knew I wanted to be in this industry, but I didn't know where. I didn't know if I wanted to be a designer, a buyer, a wholesaler, a retailer. I didn't know. I knew I wanted to be in this business. And I grew up in a family that owned a construction company. My grandfather built most of the Safeway stores on the West Coast. And so I grew up in this, my entire family worked in construction. And so I was the guy that was like, yeah, that's probably not my thing. I traveled with my grandfather. I'm like, this is a really cool, Papa, but this is not my future. And I'm like the first grandson, the first guy. Like I was going to be that.
You were the chosen one, and all you wanted to talk to was about Grandpa's construction boots. So, like, Grandpa, you need some new construction boots, bro.
I really was, but to be honest, he was such an incredible leader, and I write about it actually in the book. And he was really, the book is dedicated to him because he taught me this idea of kind of servant leadership. So as the CEO of a construction company, I would, as a teenager, travel with him to construction sites and watch him lead. And, he'd be on a visit on a site, just like I'm at a visit on a store. He knew who everybody was. He knew their names. He knew their family. He would introduce himself. And I watched people and how they reacted to him. And I was like, I want to be a leader like that, but I don't want to build grocery stores. So as I really thought about my education and then my career, to answer your question, I joined Gap Kids as an assistant manager in the early 90s. And Gap at that time, Gap Kids was a separate division, but was really one of the best brands in retail to work for. Best training programs, incredible leadership, growing, like really setting the stage for American retail. And their investment in me and promotions through running bigger stores, through district manager, through kind of corporate roles. I led visual merchandising. I think I really made that decision during those kind of years when someone said, you're really good at this. We're going to make sure you get where you need to go. And from there, similarly, like I've tried to instill that in myself and my own leadership style and the leaders around me. Like that's our responsibility in retail, is to like find that talent and develop them to the place where they can have their dream career.
So obviously leadership and leading people is a big part of what you do. Walk me through your career arc. Like, what is it that, like, vice president of stores at INTERMIX, obviously you have a big passion, but what is your secret sauce? Why do people want to have you on the team? What have you kind of brought to the table over the years? And maybe that's changed 10 times, but what would you say your secret sauce is?
Yeah, it hasn't actually changed. I put in the book kind of this 3 pillars of what I think successful retail looks like, which are empathy, curiosity, and focus. And I didn't actually recognize that that's what I was really good at until I sat down and said, what are actually the pillars of what makes great retail people? I won't even say leaders, because I think any role in retail is the same. So my leadership style has always been very empathetic and very curious and very focused on what I wanted to accomplish. So I think that the empathy component in retail is about understanding the customer, listening to what they need, figuring out what your team needs, figuring out what your company needs, and being empathetic to how to grow it. And then that kind of curiosity of spending a lot of time listening to your team. I think I actually get a lot of feedback of like, hey, Ron sat down and listened to what I had to say at every level. I would visit stores and say, let's put a Ron's roundtable together, sign up on this sheet, first 12 people to sign up, like go outside the store and just have me listen to what's going on, the good, bad, and the ugly. So this idea of being curious about your business, curious about your customer, curious about your experience, and focus on what you need to accomplish. Because retail is so complex, so many different skills you need to have, so many different, and again, many ways self-taught things that you need to understand. What you focus on, what you need to do, is a big part of just my leadership. And I've actually brought that with me everywhere I've gone, and I've chosen the brands to work for based on where they were in their arc of impact in the industry. So I've worked for Apple I joined Apple in iPhone 2, right? Actually launch week. And
I'm still using that one.
Oh yeah. So that's funny that iPhone 12 is back to the same size they were when they first came out.
Mine's the size of it's huge.
Yeah, so is mine now, but I'm ready to go back small again. But we hadn't really figured out what the process of buying a phone or switching to Mac or all of that was. So I chose Apple during those years. I helped start West Elm, and I chose Bonobos when I knew their business model was a very unique one in the industry and still today highly important. Saint Laurent at the time, under Eddie Slamon's creative direction, I knew that it was the hottest brand in luxury at the time, and I wanted to run that. And INTERMIX, again, sits in a really important place in the industry. So I've definitely picked my path at the same time and gone after the brands I wanted to work for. And my career has definitely not been accidental, but it's accidental for a lot of people that just end up in it because they started as doing something part-time, and here they are today.
How do you pick these brands that are on that arc, like you mentioned? I mean, obviously, everybody that you just mentioned was a household name, but I'm guessing when you were with Bonobos, certainly somebody like me had never heard of it.
Yeah.
West Elm is in every major and secondary, sometimes I guess even tertiary markets these days, but I bet that wasn't the case when you were there. Like, what is it about these brands that is grabbing your attention and making you say, like, hey, I want to dedicate years of my life to this thing? Like, do they all share a common thread, or is it just you looking for a new challenge and finding kind of a smaller brand and thinking you can help it grow? Like, what is it that brought you to these brands?
So I pay a lot of attention to what their contribution is to the industry from a people, place, a culture, a product innovation side. I pay a lot of attention to just even social media like LinkedIn, like which brands are actually, you see their teams posted on there and they're really proud to work for that company. I watch what those brands are. And I also, I pay a lot of attention to what's being written about them and who works there, because that's a big component of that, because great people always want to work around other great people. And why did they choose to be there, and what's important about that brand, and where are they funded, kind of what their growth trajectory or not. INTERMIX has not opened a new store in years. In fact, we've gotten smaller for really the benefit of the brand. So it's not always about high growth as we were several years ago. But in some ways, I'm actually kind of intuitive about what I feel like this is going to add value to the world and to retail, and I want to be a part of that. And so I listen and I watch a lot.
So what is it? I'm going to use an example that I've used before, so I apologize to the listeners that are listening to me repeat myself, but I'm going to use the most simplistic example. What can a brand do to make themselves more like Chick-fil-A and less like McDonald's, right? Because if you put those two stores next to each other, and I guess this is a bigger example down south because these things are everywhere, you walk into a Chick-fil-A that shares a curb with McDonald's, and you're going to have completely different experiences with that frontline worker, with that person that's actually ringing you up. The Chick-fil-A, 9 out of 10, they're going to ask you how your day's going. They're going to smile, and the McDonald's person is going to be like, "Yo, here's your fries. Friggin' hit the bricks," right? Like, what is it about it?
You do touchscreen there,
which I'm fine with that at this point. But my question is more like, how do these brands establish a culture that makes people generally or genuinely excited to be there and excited to interact? Like, how do brands figure that out?
So it always starts at the top. It starts with culture. And in fact, I have it here on my desk because I just printed it. There was a McKinsey report that just came out that I saw on Business of Fashion. The title is "The Human Touch at the Center of Customer Experience Excellence." And it's all about culture, and that culture in a company always starts at the top, and what you make important, how you lead, how you enable the service. So there are examples in this article about like customer service reps that were given very strict things that they had to say. And if you reached a point in the conversation where you couldn't answer the customer's question or solve it, you pass to a supervisor. And then as a customer, you're just annoyed. Well, let me get my manager on the phone. Let me transfer your call. Versus companies that say, you know what, your primary responsibility is to make sure that the customer is happy. Do what you need to do. Those are the brands with that human touch. That's the Chick-fil-A. that they would say, we're not actually selling food. We're selling a service and a brand. And we don't care how much you sell. We care that people leave here feeling great. And so that's a company mantra that needs to be in place. And every interaction, every communication, every call you're on, every store visit you're on, don't change the message. Put the customer, I would say employee experience and customer experience, never veer from that message. And the brands that don't do that well are the ones that like, well, the president said this and the vice president said this. And then I had a store visit and they said this. And then I was on a conference call and they said this. Like, what's actually going on here? That is the worst thing you can do to a brand.
Yeah, there's a great restaurant group out of the Midwest called the Cameron Mitchell Restaurant Group. And they're all about hospitality. They do pretty high-end restaurants for the most part. And their mantra, to your point, is yes is the answer. What is the question? Like, it doesn't matter what the freaking customer wants. Like, yeah, we'll figure it out. I can't make you a milkshake. I'm going to go to the store down the street. I'm going to get ice cream and I'm going to make you a milkshake or a grilled cheese or whatever it is. And I think that, like, what point, because all industries or all brands probably start from a good place, right? They're started from a extremely passionate entrepreneur, a group of entrepreneurs. Like, in your experience, at what level does that get lost? Is it the 10th store? Is it the 100th store? Is it the X number in EBITDA? Like, at what point do you, like for instance, you're at Bonobos or you're at West Elm and you're like, you know what? It's time to check the door. Like, I can feel that the culture is changing. I can't control it anymore. Like, is there like a tipping point for brands that they get to where you start to feel like it's probably time to, take your talents to South Beach?
It's such an interesting question. I think it actually can be done at scale with the right level of leadership. So I've seen it done really well in larger brands. I would go back even, Apple. I'll just say Apple's a good example. Yeah, people at Apple love working at Apple, and there isn't a bigger brand out there. Hundreds and hundreds of people work in those stores. Every store here in Manhattan has hundreds of employees. And I know many of them. I know the leadership in this city for Apple. They are obsessed with the brand and they're obsessed with the customer, and they would do anything to make it right. So I actually think it can be done really well at scale, that every touch point that every employee has is right on message. But I've also seen a smaller brand that veers off of that, then the whole thing crashes and burns because of it. So I don't think that there's a tipping point, but I think that there's a leadership, often a leadership
a vacuum
misalignment that can happen.
To your point, using Apple, they lost the plot when Steve Jobs left. It wasn't until he came back that they were able to realign and focus on that customer again. So I think you're dead on that it comes from the top. Let's take them out of the equation. Who else in your field is impressing you right now? Like, it's fascinating to me to watch these new, sexy, digitally native, like direct-to-consumer type of brands and watch them come up and be scrappy and agile versus the legacy brands that have to work really hard to adapt. They have to work against legacy systems and old ways of thinking and old hierarchies. Like, who in your world is impressing you that's really staying relevant, that's keeping the customer first, that's keeping their values? Like, who would you say is knocking it out right now?
I actually think right now Sephora is killing it.
Yeah,
Sephora, again,
it's amazing because it doesn't get more competitive than their little competitive set right now. I mean, that is a crowded marketplace. Super crowded
because you've got all department stores. You have everyone's up and coming. All these startup brands. Everything on Instagram is beauty. I mean, you're right. It's a huge space. But when you meet people who work at Sephora, it's similar to Apple. They can't actually think of working anywhere that's not beauty. Apple employees can't think of working at formerly Microsoft stores, and people that work in beauty love working in beauty. And if you can create a culture then that is a fantastic place to work, that welcomes all, and the beauty space right now is also so in line with what's happening in the world, and gender identity, and just being your best self, whatever you want that self to be today. Sephora embraces that, and you can see it in you can feel it in the store, you can see it in their culture, you can see it in their business, you can see what they're doing, and I admire what they're doing very much so. I think you can take a really competitive space, and they're an enormous business, and still do it really well.
So so obviously you're very dialed into luxury. Obviously it's no secret that we're going through a kind of a once in a generation shift right now. Everybody that I talk to says that every trend that was out there has been accelerated by 5 years in the last 6 or 7 months. What do you see coming out on the other side and changing your field, that your luxury field? What do you think the long-term lasting implications are for your field because of what we're going through now, COVID-19?
Yeah, I think it's first and foremost, luxury has never really been an omni business because it was always about brick and mortar. It was always about the brand experience, getting the customer in the door, even if it was a tourist, get them in the door, experience the brand in its best expression of brick and mortar, and hopefully maintain a great relationship with them. What this year has taught us is you need to actually connect with the customer in a variety of different ways. So that could be through your website. There are brands like Chanel that didn't even sell online until this year.
That's insane to think about. I didn't even know that. Is that true?
It is true. Yeah, they didn't have a sellable website. It was all brick and mortar and wholesale accounts. So like this idea of like it's not a choice to not be omni. It's not a choice to connect with the customer wherever that customer is, how they want to shop. They may say, hey, I actually prefer to do consignment. So in luxury, that's kind of a big deal that you could say, I know your closet. I know what you like. We just got this in. I'm going to send it to your home. You try it on, send us back what you don't like. So that has actually grown quite a bit. For us, the idea of chat on the website we were in like small pilot, but if you're not in the store and you're in the multi-brand space, how does this fit? What does this look like in person? Let's do FaceTime instead. Maybe you need to do curbside. Maybe you need to do in-home. If she won't come to you, you go to her. And so this kind of idea of the client in luxury is clearly in charge of how they want to shop. And the brand can't sit back, which is what luxury has done, and said, no, I'm going to wait for you to come to me. That's not an option anymore. You've got to find out, did she pivot during shutdown to web, or did she wait for the store to reopen? Is she coming back? Did she move away, which has also happened? Did she go to her home in the Hamptons, in Aspen, in Marin, in Greenwich? She's not in the city anymore. Where did she go? So now it's about, okay, you moved to Aspen. Now let's get the store to you instead. So there's this whole shift of how do you sell? How do you do it in a way with less tourism? How do you create this life that's in a very non-traditional way? So it has, you're right, moved forward very quickly, but it was necessary to do. It's just forced us all.
Do you think that's lasting change? Or do you think that is going to revert back to the mean when this thing is over, and the people that can afford luxury? I mean, the people that are moving to their Aspen house are either born with money or probably a little bit later in their careers. These aren't 28-year-olds that are moving to their house in Aspen as a rule.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think that those people are going to want to shop online? I mean, because part of it is walking into the store and having people fawn over you, walking out with the sick-looking Gucci bag, or not the actual purse, but the bag that says Gucci all over it, or implies Gucci on it. Do you think that changes?
I think the brick and mortar business will always be the biggest component of it, but the piece of it that's e-commerce will grow. So I think the store will always play an important role for that customer, but there's a customer that's not in major cities anymore. The tourist is not here. So there's an e-com business chunk of it that's probably gone from 10 to 20 or 10 to 15 that maybe was 5 before. So it's growing for sure. There's a need for it.
Yeah, to your point on Chanel, it's people that have always been like, yeah, sure, would be nice to get a new website. Now it's top priority. It's the only thing they're thinking about.
Completely agree. Or, integrated. Saint Laurent, we were done through we shipped through Net-a-Porter. We didn't even own the website. And to this idea of we didn't fill from stores. It was all handled third party. It was done through wholesale, in that we were focused exclusively on brick and mortar. And that was only 4 years ago. So this whole business has had to really pivot and learn, and in a positive way, in a good way.
So let's focus on you for a minute. Take it out of the macro back to you. Talk to me about the passion that led you. You mentioned your grandfather. You mentioned kind of servant leadership, but walk me through, because it's not like you're like, I guess I'll write a book. This thing had to be kind of burning you up inside for you to take time away from your 9 to 5, which is busy, to write this sucker. So walk me through what you had to get out of your system and you had to get on paper, and why it was so important to you. You got it.
So I remember it really well, 3.5 years ago, that summer of 2017, this whole term, retail apocalypse, started to trend.
It's not a retail podcast unless you bring that up once. So thank you for checking that box. I appreciate that.
So for someone like me that has been in this business for 25 plus years, the first time I heard that term, I'm like, what are you talking about? We're not having a retail apocalypse. The business is changing, but people that work in retail love it. So I said, I'm going to start a blog, because I'm going to figure out what people that work in this industry think, and what do they say. I'm going to write about this and understand their responses. So I did that. It was called Retail Fitness. And it was interesting because the response rates from people who work in retail were really high. I get a lot of subscribers, and they were really hungry for this. And I said, this is interesting. And then I took it all down and said, I'm just going to save this. And then last year, I could just sense that there's an undervalued, under-celebrated, enormous industry in this country of people who work in retail who don't have someone that says, this is freaking great. And I know that you love it. No one's telling you that it's okay to love it. And that was the original title of the book. It's okay to retail, something around retail. It's okay to love. And because that's what it is.
Retail pride's better. Retail pride's better. You made the right choice.
Thank you. And the subtitle, the guide to celebrating your accidental career, because the book is a guide to celebrating your accidental career. And so I kept thinking about this idea that there needs to be a message in the industry for people who work in it, that it's okay to love it and be proud of it and to celebrate it. And here's maybe some tools to help you do that. Here's some leadership concepts I put in there, like Ron's retail leadership ideas, and to spend less time saying, I work in retail, and then you're 35 and this is your career, whether you want to admit it or not. This is your career, and take it and own it. And in some ways, similar to what I did, choose great brands, choose great leaders, find great places to work, find people around you who are good at this, who are inspirational to you, and start to build a personal board of directors and really own your career, and stop letting it be accidental. Stop letting it happen to you, and own it and be proud of it, because I know that you like it. So recognize that in yourself and go for it. And this book, for me, the intent was to say to the millions of people that work in it, go for it. It's okay. Be proud of it and recognize this as a great career. But it's only a great career if you choose to make it so, because it can be a really horrible career if you don't.
So walk me through, that's an extremely professional, diagnostic way to look at it. Walk me through. So let's say I'm 30 years old. I've got some retail chops. I'm thinking, this seems to be somewhere I can excel. I enjoy it. Walk me through that shift to making it your career as opposed to your hobby or what you do till you get a real job, all those cliches. And then walk me through that personal board of directors comment that you made, because I think that's something that I usually hear in an extremely entrepreneurial, sophisticated way, as opposed to somebody that's like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna get my act together in the retail world. Walk me through that shift and walk me through a good example that somebody could take and use for their personal board of directors.
Yeah. So I'd say number one, get really clear on what you're good at and what you love. So if you think about the retail space, to your point, if I've been doing this for a few years, maybe, and my vision for this book was, a store manager for some random brand in the middle of the country, they're working in the mall, saying, like, I need someone to tell me that this is okay. And so I would look at that person and I would say, what are you really good at? Are you good at visual merchandising? Do you love store operations? Are you really good on the sales floor? Are you a great manager on duty? Are you a great developer of people? Like, what are your strengths? And from there, we say, okay, great. I love visual merchandising. Okay, so who are the brands where visual merchandising is really recognized and celebrated? Who is that? And then pay attention to what they're doing and choose brands that can celebrate your strengths, not try to teach you something that you're not good at. And operations and some of the more tactical things, loss prevention, those are all really important parts of retail, but not everybody loves it, including myself. I always have to have a really strong, great head of store ops who can do all the details and the checklists and all the behind the scenes. That's not what I want to do. So I've always said it needs to be about people and culture and service and great product and what that experience on the front end. But if I'm someone that loves the back end of this business, then find those great operators too, because those are good jobs. So the idea of know what you're really good at and build your network from there. So LinkedIn is the best resource for this. Find people who are doing it well, connect with them, ask them questions, ask for 15 minutes of your time. And that builds that board of directors around you of, say, once I've accepted that I want this to be intentional, who can help me grow my network, get me where I want to go, and give me some honest advice. Don't ask your mom, ask somebody else of am I actually good at this? What should I be doing? Where should I work? How can I be better? Build people around you that can help you with that. And sometimes just be honest with you. And I think once you've done all of that, you can set yourself up and say, all right, now I'm prepared to make good choices.
When these people need a network, 'cause obviously, your network is your net worth in a lot of different instances. Yeah. Certainly in my world, do these people that are kind of living in a flyover state, working at the mall, do they need to, because they can't just walk down to Fifth Avenue or somewhere and rub the same elbows that you're rubbing day one. Certainly they could if that was their long-term goal, but do they need to get on, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups? How would you get somebody to start? What's that? Because in so many instances, it's the start, right? People see where they want to go. They want to be, living in Tribeca, working with these amazing brands and making an impact, because that's what you're doing. You're writing a book. You're making an impact with these massive brands who work with these incredible brands. But what would you say to the person that needs that first step? How would you tell them to get started? Because sometimes that's the tripper.
Yeah, I think the first step, if it's not around you, do it virtually. So I think one of the benefits of the last 6 months were all of these Zoom seminars, panels, they're all over the place. And I've been on many of them myself. And I did some for a couple of universities. I did one for USC a couple of weeks ago. And I got all these messages back from USC students that said, I'm studying retail management, merchandising, PR, social media. like, I really loved what you had to say. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? And vice versa. I've watched some panels and saw some really interesting people and messaged them and said, you seem cool. Like, can we chat about something? And people in general, I think this year more than ever, have been very generous with their time.
And that's what I would echo. I would absolutely reiterate what you just said. It's very easy to look at people that have a little bit of experience, that have a really cool job, and just assume that they're dicks, right? And that they don't want to talk to people. But in my experience, don't get me wrong, I've met plenty of people that are not cool. Don't get me wrong, but that's not the rule. That's kind of the exception. I've been shocked at people that are ahead of me in my world or in the retail world that say, "Oh yeah, I'd love to chat with you about what I'm doing," because I think that it's easy to overestimate how much people want to listen to these guys. Because like what you and I were talking about before we went live, it's like, hey man, trust me, we're going to get along great because I actually care about what you say, and I'm a retail nerd. My wife doesn't want to hear me talk about retail all day. She just leaves the room. Most people, even in my industry, don't want to hear me talk about retail because I like to nerd out about it. So when you ask these people to share a few minutes of your time and you have genuine enthusiasm about hearing what they have to say, you'll be shocked at the people that will be like, oh, sure, I'll give you 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And that 5 minutes can turn into an internship. You have no idea. So take that first step. I think that's extremely good advice that you're giving.
I think we've had the best opportunity this year to have access to people that we've never had before. And messages on LinkedIn and things are great. And to your point, some people respond, but if you can see them live and to answer some of your question earlier, in the motivation for the book for me was I can actually access a much bigger audience with this book that's a little bit of me and a lot more about retail than I can, and do virtual book clubs and just like, let's get this in the hands of a lot of people is easier than me 15 minutes at a time, one person at a time. I actually think the message needs to be that much bigger for them. And I keep referencing this like flyover state store manager because I don't even think that they know that this book exists today, but they are the intended audience for it. This is not a book about the future of retail because they can't change the future of retail. They can only change what's happening in their store with their team today and feel good about it. And that's important to me.
So Ron, you've already been extremely gracious with your time. I know you got a million things going on. You got the book coming out or just come out.
Yeah.
Tell people how they can interact with you. Tell people where they can find the book. Reiterate the name. Explain to people how they can connect with you.
Great. So the book is called Retail Pride: The Guide to Celebrating Your Accidental Career. It's on Amazon. It's in hardcover, paperback, ebook. It's on Apple Books. And so you can go to retailpride.com. And there you'll see, you can sign up for kind of future information. There's a link to the Amazon site, and then other just resources that are going to hopefully come as a result of this book. And then, of course, LinkedIn is an easy way to find me. I will just reference something we didn't talk about. There's a very intentional reason I did a hardcover book and a softcover book, paperback book. So the hardcover, if you've seen an image, it's like bright.
Do you have one in front of you? Hold one up.
You know what? I don't.
What? Ron, you got to have there's no book.
They're still being shipped. But the back, it's very colorful intentionally because it should be bright. You think about retail, bright and fun and energetic, and this idea of all these colors that all are welcome to work here. But the back of the book, I don't even have one. The back of the book has no text. So because I actually wanted it to look like an art piece, and that all the colors that are on it kind of translate from the spine outward, and they are a piece of art that I translated into the cover. And so this idea of like the hardcover book is an art piece to celebrate art, the retail as an art form, because I really do believe that, versus my picture on the back, which you'll get on the paperback. So I think that it's been very like intentional to have it in so many different ways to get it to the right audience.
That's very cool, Ron. Well, congrats on the book. A couple quick takeaway questions off the top of your head, knee-jerk kind of responses. So take luxury out of the picture. What other massive changes have either surprised you or just that you've had to absorb that have happened this year that you think aren't going away? Like, tell me something else that's really kind of stuck with you that you've noticed kind of from a high-level retailer point of view.
So I'm going to take the very personal approach that I do is you have to pay more attention to what your team is feeling right now. Your team is traumatized, and your team needs you to ask how they are and to help them solve what's going on at home. And I've seen it. I saw it kind of first. I see it firsthand, but reopening and then closing again for riots. Reopening, I closed again for riots in certain cities. And then somebody on the team tests positive. I mean, the experience that they're having in the store is really rough right now. To the more empathetic you can be to what's happening, I think is teaching us all as leaders that that's your number one priority, that your team has to feel safe. They have to feel connected, and they have to feel taken care of today. And that shouldn't ever go away. But this is almost forced you to do that.
How will experiential retail bring people back into the brick and mortar store? Because at the end of the day, you're a brick and mortar guy. Obviously, we both care about omnichannel, but I'm certainly a brick and mortar guy. Like, how good of experiences going to have to get in order to get people back into the store?
They're going to have to be exceptional. And that's why this almost excites me even more, because we have to be the best we've ever been. Of my doing this for 30 years, we had the luxury of traffic. We had the luxury of lots of cash and opening lots of stores, and everything you could ever dream of was at our fingertips. Today, we don't have any of those things. And so we have to actually be that much better, that much more connected, that much better at experience, that much better hiring, all of it. You have to curate the best experience possible, because there's less inventory in stores. There are likely fewer people. There are definitely less traffic. And so now it's, what is the best experience for the brand that I can have is a huge part of the future now. And so that piece, when the client comes back, they're in control. They can choose now what they want that to look like.
Do you think, so which direction do you, and I'm gonna kind of simplify what you've said and probably even too much, but do you think that this will go more the Bonobos customer experience center, where you walk in and basically the store is the size of a big walk-in closet. They have one of everything, and they're just trying to get you your size right so they can send you to the website? Or do you think it's going to go the other way, like the Gucci experience store in Chelsea that looks like it's bigger than a Walgreens, and you're just immersed in the brand with every tactile experience in the store? Do you think it verges one way or the other, or do you think it's still just brand specific?
I think it's very brand specific. But what I know is you can't just have a store that sells the same things you have on your website, that just pick it up off of a table and go to the cashier and leave. If it has to be something that's very unique to your brand, that's very unique to that experience that they're not getting on your website. Because the whole intent is, if I can get it on the website, I'm going to.
Yeah, why am I here? Yeah.
Then I need to. I love that Gucci store example, because that is an experience, that store. And it's still, actually waited in line to go into that store because they're limiting the traffic so long. Like 2 weekends ago, I waited in line to get in there. And I had no intention of buying. I like that store because it's an experience. And so more of that needs to keep happening, because that joy that comes from that store experience is an important component to our future.
All right, last question, and then I'm going to let you go. Do you think that, let's just stay with Gucci Bonobos, do you think that is a better way to continue to grow the in-store experience, or do you think it's going to be more stores like Neighborhood Goods, Story, Naked, those types of stores that it's so experiential that you really don't even know what brand you're looking at. You're just there because it's like Disney World for retail nerds, like Beta groups like that. What do you think is going to kind of carry the day?
I actually love those examples and that kind of mix of different brands. That sense of discovery is a really important part of it. I think both can exist. But there's so many different avenues that you can take to be experiential that's right for you. And they're all positive, but you can't revert back to the way that it was. So whatever that looks like for your brand is good. It can be one of everything. It can be 25 different brands, even for my own brand. There's 150 different brands, and we're often first in the US. So I think this idea of curating something that's new and interesting and different and fun and engaging and filled with great people is great retail. And that was the past, and I think it's still the future. I'm very optimistic about this still.
That's great. I was going to let you go, but you made me ask one more question. Sorry, it's not you answered it really well. It's not my fault. How do you guys at INTERMIX curate? Is there specific websites like Business of Fashion you mentioned earlier that you like to follow, certain thought leaders that you like to follow? Like, how do you guys stay on that bleeding edge?
Yeah, I would say it's the best buying team in the industry of people who are really tuned in to what's going on, both from attending just all the runway shows, who are up and coming brands. They're going to Copenhagen and other cities where there's Sydney emerging new designers, and often bringing them here to the US first for INTERMIX. So there's a high attention to what do we think the trend is going to be, and how do we bring it to her first and kind of curate it for her in that way. So it's an incredible buying team and a great kind of fashion office. And on the store side, we really do curate every store differently. And that makes also 32 versions of the buy really complex. Different designers want to be in different locations. They have their own freestanding store, and we can't carry that brand. Like in Soho, there are brands we can't carry because they have their own store. So I think that there's this whole idea of really understanding your customer and then giving your customer what they need. And we do that really well.
Awesome. Ron, thank you so much for joining me. I just want to take a second to acknowledge you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your knowledge that you've gained over an entire career with the listeners. Congrats again on the book. Really excited for you and for the people that you said that need to read this. I think it's great that you've taken time out of your schedule to put something out in the world. So thank you for your time and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate your time.